And what she's doing is we all imagine, we're thinking of all the marvelous things of the world. When we say this prayer, when we see all the marvelous things of the world that make people happy, thinking simply, pile them all up in our mind and imagine offering to the Buddha as a request for the teaching. Mandala is used here, it's like it's somebody's abode. So here we're talking about the abode of ordinary beings, which is all the contents of this world, imagining in your mind, offering to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. That's the plan.
Sajipöki jukshin metok tramrirablingi nidegen padi sangye jindu dumite Waidrokunam dak jin la chupashog. Perfect, pure, holy gurus, from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami.
Okay, good. And now I'll sing this little prayer. Every time I'll say the meaning every time. It's good to remember the meaning, not just sing the pretty tunes. The first two lines are for those of us who are already committed to being Buddhists. We're sort of reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second two lines are just expressing this marvelous aspiration, this big motivation, big reason, broad reason for sitting here together listening to these teachings so that we can take some tools from it so we can go one step at a time developing our Buddhahood, becoming a Buddha so we can be a benefit to sentient beings based on great compassion. Sangye charan soke chongnam la janchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog sangye charan soke chongnam la janchu badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog. And I'll say a bit the English, but a little bit more. So we're saying until we are enlightened, this is long term, we are going to rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha, his teachings, and our community of those fellow practitioners. So, and by all the virtuous karma that we create, the seeds we plant in our mind in this next, period, by listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, so we can really be of benefit to every single suffering sentient being. That's it. So I first have to say I've got to leave early today. I'm so sorry. 15 minutes, Nina. So I'll have to talk faster. Fill up the last 15 minutes. Squeeze it in, okay? I've got to whiz off somewhere. I did my calendar wrong.
We'll double our attention, Venerable. No problem.
Okay.
We
So I have to remember, Talia, how many more talks have we got? This is like one more, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, one more after this. Okay, good. Well, I've got a feeling that this time today, we got up to bodhicitta, didn't we? So we're now up to the 6 perfections. So let's just summarize the steps, the stages, these little kind of stepping stones on the way. So we started this entire packaging of Buddha's teachings. We're using this packaging that Tsongkhapa calls, our lineage Lama in the 14th century calls the Lam Rim, the path gradual. It's a course, basically. And you graduate as a Buddha, okay? So as I've always been saying, any body of knowledge you start the earlier stuff, then you study the middle stuff, and you go to the advanced stuff. It's sort of logical. But it really does take us time to see that, like we've been talking, So this last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the compassion wing. And we can see, the level we're trying to get to, this outrageous level, to actually finally, literally change our mind to the point where there's no longer the thought of I in the usual neurotic way that we have, so that we can only benefit others. Even just saying those words is pretty nutty for modern psychology and neuroscience. There's no equivalent in our culture. So it sounds a bit like mental illness even. So we've got to understand what it means, And then we must understand, as we've been talking, that you cannot get to that level of compassion. It is utterly impossible until you've done the series of practices before, which is high school and junior school, which is the middle scope and the lower scope, where you're priming your mind. So the very first one is, you've got to see the very first level. Well, the very first thing to prime our minds, we begin this whole talk by just, especially for us modern people, we have to remind ourselves what Buddha's saying the mind is. because that's what gets become a Buddha. If you think your brain becomes a Buddha, you're going to be in serious trouble. You're going to, be ridiculous. So we're going to know what Buddha means by the mind. So we started with that. Mind is not physical. Mind is not the handiwork of mummy, daddy, or a creator. Mind does not begin in the mother's womb. Mind, being the product of cause and effect, is beginningless and endless, as nutty as that sounds. Mind is therefore beginningless. And then so we prime our minds in that way, and then we start to think about it. The Atisha in the 11th century, and then Tsongkhapa get us to think about, to want us to develop this marvelous potential, because that's the potential of mind, to become a Buddha, free of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness. So we want to, we need, the next step is we need, Tsongkhapa tells us in the 14th century, we need to get a decent teacher. A mentor. I mean, I've just used this word lately. It's very interesting. Look at the definition of mentor. It's a nice word in the West. It's, it's an experienced, listen to this definition. It's very nice. An experienced, what was it? I have to look up the definition. It's really good. We say guru, we have a panic attack, we get very strange, because the Asian way of talking is very different from ours. It's very ancient, especially, 2,000 years old Asian, and Tibetan. It's very fundamentalist somehow. It's very interesting. So we've got to use these easygoing words to help our minds. An experienced, listen to this, an experienced and trusted advisor. I mean, that is the perfect definition of a guru, It doesn't use the word Buddha, that's all. An experienced and trusted advisor. Honey child, we all need that one, I tell you. So Tsongkhapa, of course, goes into immense detail based on all the ancient texts of exactly what that means, and the qualities of a person who is qualified to be that, and how you search for one, and then having found one and having confidence in that person, trusting that person, then how you commit to the relationship with that person. Why? For one reason only, for you, so you can become a Buddha. Not to make them happy, not to be stroked and be told you're a good girl. No. Why do you have a music teacher? So you can become a musician. Why do you go to a cooking teacher? So you can become a cook. Why do you have a Buddhist teacher, a Buddhist mentor? So you can become a Buddha. That's the sole purpose. So as Mahakaruna says, you better check your gurus very carefully, honey, because you're going to end up like them. That's my one piece of advice today, okay? So I love that. I just love that. It's my favorite line in all of Pabonka's 1,200 pages of the Lam Rim book, Check them very carefully, because you're going to end up like them. So we need one of them, honey. We need a mentor. We definitely need. Because of the example, I mean, in this case, it's more radical than a mentor, because we're going to become that. We're going to, even the way Buddhism talks, we're going to become oneness with that person. That's pretty tasty. So, okay, we better do all that. And then we start to think about what our teacher gets us to think about, and Tsongkhapa goes into it. This is still priming our minds to get us ready to practice. We start to think of the preciousness of this life we've got, I mean, which we totally take for granted. If any good things happen, we just assume it's our right, and we demand more. We don't think, I mean, we'd never have the thought that we're the product of unbelievable hard work in past lives. I mean, that's a brand new idea to us. But once we know that, you wouldn't want to waste it. When you look in your garden, even as a tiny garden with a few little veggies in it, you just look at it with such delight, because those veggies didn't fall out of the sky. You do not take them for granted. You remember every bit of hard work you did to get that delicious veggie garden. So what's the action point? Each point here, what's the action? Don't waste it. Perfect. Eat them up, yes, but plant more, please, babe. Don't waste this precious life. Now we enter into the junior school, first level of the lower scope of teachings. And here the teaching, the main teaching is, based upon Buddha's view. Buddha's telling us that every millisecond of what we think and do and say turns me into the person I become. It's a good way to put it. So I better learn I better learn to know, given that I want happiness and don't want suffering, I better learn to know what things to do and think, and what things to do and say, or what things at this stage to refrain from doing and saying that will at least prevent me from the future in having suffering. It seems a very kind of passive way of putting it, but that's a really good way to put it. So Buddha basically says, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. He gives a little list of 7 things. The first 7 are basically don't harm others. And you say, well, why not, Buddha? Well, Jesus says because God says so, and that's okay, but Buddha says so, but not because he says so. He's saying, I have found from my observation that everything you think and do and say, Robina, will sees in your mind that either will produce your happiness and suffering, bottom line. So do you want suffering? No. Well, don't cause it. So, okay, so you don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't this, don't that. Very practical advice. Your doctor will tell you want diabetes, Robina? Well, then don't eat sugar. She doesn't eat, now listen to this. She doesn't say, well, go and eat good food. She says, stop eating bad food. That's the first step. So important. This whole level of practice is called the practice of the ethics of restraint. You're refraining from doing negative things because you don't want future suffering. So that is beginning to really steady us, control our body, control our speech, control the servants of our mind, the essence of karma. And then you take refuge, you live in vows, you increase the power of that, then you do purification as well. And then you can die with a happy mind because you've now beginning to conquer the causes of the first kind of suffering, which is the suffering of suffering. But you can do more. So now you go to high school. Now you get to the root of the problem, your mind, your crazy delusions, these ridiculous nonsense deep in the bones of our mind that we've been believing in for eons, that are all nonsense, Buddha says, have no valid basis. But the main point here is to unpack and unravel the three, mainly the, anger and attachment, these two poisons based on the root poison. Attachment being the main one, this bottomless pit of emotional hunger, always want something more. There's this kind of, very kind of, it sounds very painful to say it like this, but this hubris, this attachment, this hubris that I deserve only the good. When we get good things, we think, give me more, please. When a bad thing's happening, we have a panic attack, don't we? And that's called anger, upset, irritated, annoyed. And these go very deep in us. So we start to unpack and unravel our mind at this level, start to recognize and distinguish between the delusions and the virtues. That's the key job of being a Buddhist. This is not the way modern psychology talks. And why? Because this is the root of your problems. So now you're really at this junior school and high school, first and second scopes, low and middle scopes of the Lam Rim. Now this is the wisdom wing. And if you graduate here, you'd be on the Theravada path. You'd now get concentration and you'd get realized emptiness and one life or other. You've perfected that. You've achieved your own nirvana. You've achieved your liberation from suffering. You cut the root of all the rubbish. And now when you die, you won't come back. But we're going to go further. We're going to go on to university. We're on the Mahayana path. So we go through the same stages, but you just don't graduate at high school. So now, then we moved on to the essence of the realization we get in these first two scopes is renunciation, giving up suffering and its causes. You're up to here with suffering. You're vomiting at the thought of more suffering. And these first two scopes are intensive inner work. Some of us have a very strong tendency for compassion. We don't even think that we're suffering. We think it's selfish to look at ourselves. We are primordially, fundamentally missing the point if you think that. It's almost like arrogance. It means you haven't begun to really understand the depths of suffering the Buddha is describing. And you cannot have levels of compassion that he says we can until you've understood your own suffering and are revolted by it. You've got to do the inner work first, and that's the wisdom wing, junior school and high school. In the West, we really just skim over that. Oh, no, I'm not suffering. I want to think of others. It's arrogance, I tell you. We can't get the level of compassion the Buddha's talking about until we've understood suffering and its causes for ourselves. I mean, when Buddha tells us the Four Noble Truths, who do you think he's talking to? We always think he's talking about everybody else. No, he's talking to you, baby. Your suffering of change, and your all-pervasive suffering. You've got to understand what it is, what the causes are, and understand the nuts and bolts of the Buddha's path so you know exactly how to get the hell out of suffering. Then you add compassion to that. Then your compassion's got a valid basis. So then we went to the compassion wing, where we've been for the last couple of weeks, His Holiness says, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom, and wisdom is the first two scopes. The nuts and bolts of, cutting out all the nonsense in your own mind, seeing more clearly your own self, your own suffering, being utterly sick of it. And the more you do that, the more comfortable you become, the more self-respect you have, the more joy you have, the more easygoingness, the less neurotic, less attached, less angry, less jealous, more happy. That's the consequence of the first and second scopes. Your happiness. Do not ever just jump past that. Then as you're progressing in yourself, you look out in the world, you go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. And then you're able to, now on the compassion wing, we start to continue to practice the morality of restraint. We continue to practice not harming others. But the reason here is radically different. You could say on the first two scopes, junior school and high school, the main problem is attachment. Attachment to get what I want, Here on the Bodhisattva, so then the main purpose of all the practices there is to prevent you from future suffering. Now we continue working on our mind. That does not change from here to Buddhahood. We continue to work on the ethics of refraining from harming others. But now the emphasis shifts from being to stop you from future suffering, to helping you now continue to work on your mind and break down the barriers that ego and delusions have constructed between self and other, so we can be able to benefit others. So here the emphasis is on learning to give up self-cherishing. The root delusion is called ego grasping. Hang on. I'm sorry, I have to just do something. Something's happened. I'm so sorry. I'll have to be, please give me 1 minute. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. 1 minute, okay?
No problems. There's a clock change in North America. Perhaps that's why the time, kind of have to look at the schedules, but more often, more carefully. Luckily, we got like computer to tell us when the clock is.
Okay, I'm ready now. Continuing our discussions here. Okay. We're summarizing what we've done so far these last 10 weeks, 11 weeks. And then slowly moving into the final stages of the great scope of university, which is the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. So we've gone through the beginningless mind, the perfect human rebirth, move into and understand impermanence and death, and the essence of junior school, abide by the laws of karma, stop harming yourself. Then you get to the next level, you continue to now look into the mind, which is the source of why you suffer. And you start to unpack and unravel the delusions, in particular attachment. So attachment is the main enemy, as I was saying. Now we continue to move on because we realize, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Everybody's suffering. Everybody's driven by the law of karma. Everybody blames everybody else. Nobody understands that they are causing their own happiness and own suffering. They say the Bodhisattvas have the greatest compassion for us. Forget about because we don't realize emptiness, but that we don't understand cause and effect. That we are the source of our own pain. The world plays a massive role. Of course it does. But we think the world plays all the roles and we're this innocent victim to whom unfair things happen. This is the voice of ego. This is shocking. We understand that for ourselves. We can now have such compassion for sentient beings. So we continue on the compassion wing, as I said, to practice the ethics of restraining from harming. Then because the essence of there's 3 sets of vows in Buddhism. I haven't mentioned this much, but each of these levels of practice, renunciation, bodhicitta, that's a bit different. It's a bit different, sorry. But the first level of practice, the first level, junior school and high school, the vows there are called the vows of individual liberation, the vows of pati moksha, individual liberation, living according to this practice of refraining from harming others, in particular the vows of refraining from harming others. This is helping you get your liberation. Now you go to the Bodhisattva path and you continue to live in vows, and the emphasis here is also restraining from harming others, but the main emphasis is not so much on refraining from harming yourself for the future, but on breaking down the barriers between self and others so we can benefit others. So the main enemy here is called self-cherishing. We call it selfishness. It's another way of presenting attachment, really. Putting self first. It's kind of curious. We joke and we're happy to admit to attachment. Oh, I'm so attached to chocolate cake, we'll say. Oh, I'm so attached to video games, But to say that we're selfish, that feels very painful. It's very curious, isn't it? But that's the emphasis here. Because what we're trying to do with the whole Bodhisattva path is to make this paradigm shift from putting me first to putting others first. I mean, thinking of these words, but the level to which we can accomplish it is, again, like I said before, pretty shocking in our culture, Seems too radical. So we've been through these different stages. We've been looking at the different points. There's 2 different methods the Buddha taught in the Lam Rim. You'll see it for accomplishing this bodhicitta. But one we've been going through is a mixture of 2. It's 11 different points, And I haven't really gone to much detail on some of them. And gradual, they're gradual. Equanimity first, the basis, the foundation, the fundamental one of equanimity. Here, in the earlier stages, in the Hinayana level of the path, wisdom wing, junior school and high school, there is an equanimity that we accomplish, but it's not the same one. It's the same word, but it's different equanimity. As you progress on your own mind, initially when we're the victim mode, ordinary person, not aware, we're up and down like yo-yos, unhappy, crazy, excited, depressed, up and down, no control. So there's no equanimity in ourselves. As you progress practicing, lessening, controlling your body, controlling your speech, controlling your mind, calming down yourself, you become more joyful, more fulfilled, more content, therefore more equanimity within yourself. Now here, equanimity is showing something quite different. We've discussed it. The equanimity as the foundation of these 11 points that culminate in bodhicitta, this equanimity is fundamentally necessary in order to go towards bodhicitta. In particular, in order to, I'll just, reiterate this point. In order to develop love and compassion, and then eventually great compassion, which then culminates in bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is not the equivalent of love and compassion. It's the end result of love and compassion. So love and compassion are really crucial to understand, because Buddha's saying on the one, Buddha's saying, we looked at this in equanimity, that everybody wants to be happy and no one wants to suffer. So what's love? It's the thought, may you be happy. What's compassion? The thought, may you not suffer. They're the definitions of love and compassion in Buddhism. So what we're trying to do on the Bodhisattva path is have love and compassion for everybody. Excuse me, everybody will say, we'll have a panic attack. You mean the pedophiles, the terrorists, the ex-husband? Well, yes, dear. We've got to look at the logic of why. And that's what's difficult. And the logic that we're trying to learn here, which is equanimity, the first of the 11 stages that culminate in bodhicitta. The logic of equanimity is logic. Don't think of these emotional, gooey feelings. We love to think of compassion like that. That's much too superficial. It's much too flimsy. It's based on attachment half the time. Oh, I'm so full of compassion for sentient beings. I have tears. Well, I'm happy for you. But next time you hear a mean sound from your husband, you get angry. Where's your compassion gone? Because it's not stable. So right now, we reiterated this, but this is crucial because this then feeds into the rest of the development of love and compassion, and then great compassion, and then bodhicitta. But basically, everybody wants to be happy and nobody wants to suffer. But right now, and we're trying to prove that with equanimity, we're trying to see that fact. Very simple, that everybody wants to be happy and no one wants to suffer. It sounds simple on the face of it, but to feel the truth of it when you're facing the mean person, then that's when it's difficult, because we have all these wrong assumptions in our mind. So we've got to work very hard on that equanimity, get it very logical, deep in our bones, which means basically that right now, given the three main poisons, the three delusions, which are the summary of all the delusions, there are 84,000 for the Buddha, they subsume to these three, that given that we have friends, and a simple label for those we're attached to, and we have enemies, we mightn't use that word, but it's a good label for those we have aversion for, even if it's mild aversion, irritation, annoyed, the next door neighbor annoys you, the ex-husband maybe you hate, there's levels of aversion, they're called the enemy. And the third lot, as I've been saying, 99.9% of the universe is them, and that's the strangers. So what is a stranger by definition? What is an enemy? What is a friend by definition in this context? A person who does what your attachment wants. So how do we feel about them? We adore them. It's easy to love them. It's easy to want them to be happy. It's easy to have compassion. It's easy to want them not to suffer. It's easy because our heart is open and our needs are being fulfilled. So there's this kind of mutual relationship. That's the energy of attachment that makes it easy to have love and compassion. But then, of course, when the hubby gives you up for a younger version, the love turns off like a tap. And he goes from friend category into enemy category. Very simple. Right there, overnight. Boom. Can't stand the sight of him. The pain he has caused. This is true. He has caused pain by doing what he did. But, we have to, but this is the way we work, enemy and friend. And then we have the 99.9% who neither harm us nor help us. And they're called strangers. And how do we feel about them? Couldn't care less. This is the universe. Monkeys live like this, dogs, ants, everybody. Why? Because the Buddhist view of the mind, the three poisons, isn't just for us humans. It covers the entire universe, all sentient beings. So in the compassion wing, we're trying to, rip out those three delusions, specifically in relation to sentient beings, to break down the barriers that we have constructed between self and other, that are artificial barriers. So we look at the three poisons in junior school and high school, but the main point there is to calm ourselves down and stop creating more ridiculous suffering for ourselves. Here, we continue to work on these three to smash them so that we can break down the barriers between self and other. This is when we're moving towards love, compassion, great compassion, bodhicitta. This is the logic of this approach. So the main, like I mentioned last week too, but it's crucial to understand that there's just love and compassion. May you be happy, may you not suffer. Until now, with the three poisons, I only have that for my beloveds. So my compassion and love are contingent on whether you make me happy. Here we're cutting that. And we're seeing, I want to make people happy. I want everyone to be happy and everyone not to suffer. Why? Because they want it. That becomes the logic. They all want it. It's very clear. We have to prove that. And that's equanimity here. So then we develop, gradual these steps, mother, kindness of the mother, repaying the kindness, all those little steps we went through. And then the gradual exchanging self for others. And then we cultivate love. And by now, of course, it's for all. It's clear, May all be happy. Then compassion, may they not suffer. Then there's the unique characteristic of the Bodhisattva path. It's called great compassion, Mahakaruna. It's a technical term for not only do, my God, look at that suffering. Not only that, which is compassion, but it's what can I do to take it away? That's great compassion. I think the best analogy is the mother. Her kid is drowning. Her kid is about to be run over by a car. She has instant, unbelievable compassion, but she doesn't look around hoping someone else will save her child. She will run out of that car for her child. I remember seeing a video years ago about what mothers do for their children. Like they become insanely fierce. One mother ran into a burning house. All she could think of was her child. One mother lifted up a car. All she could think of was her child. So think of bodhisattvas like that for everybody, as nutty as that sounds. And that's great compassion. And that's what gives the courage. This is something that comes up every teaching everywhere among all of us. The world is unbearable, isn't it? The world is so suffering, there is no doubt. And I'm just talking the grosser level of suffering, which is the only one we see. We don't cry with compassion. We see a rich person living in the best suburb in Zurich and the best house with the best view and the best kitchens, even cleaner than the rest of Zurich. I always quote one Tibetan Lama who was asked what he thought of the West. It might have been Zurich. He said, it's so clean. And you keep on cleaning it, he said. It was wonderful. Anyway, Zurich is clean. So you feel like you live in the best house in Zurich with the best husband, you're most beautiful and you're peaceful and loving and everyone adores you, you've got money in the bank and you have lovely holidays. You go to, wherever to Bali for your holiday, and nobody would ever cry with compassion for them, which shows how limited our compassion is. We love to cry for the poor people. We love to cry for the babies and the children and the animals. They're the ones that distress us because it's so shocking. This is a very interesting point. But that's the first kind of suffering. That's the gross kind. And at least the saving grace for us, the Buddha would say, by having that kind of suffering is that we're finishing that suffering. Now, what about the second kind of suffering? The happy ones, the pretty happy ones, in rich, happy, beautiful ones, in Zurich. We would even be envious of them. We'd think, oh, look at them, they're so happy. No, we should have more compassion for them. Why? This is logic for the Buddha, but this is shocking if we don't hear it. And if we don't do high school and do the Four Noble Truths and understand the 3 levels of suffering, how can you have compassion like this? You can't. We only have compassion for the bad stuff, The second kind is even subtler, more nuanced suffering, because you're actually using up your virtue. Every time something good happens, you're using up the seeds that you planted, which is your virtue. Every time something bad happens, you're using up the seeds of your negative action. So that's the reason to rejoice. The bodhisattvas have more compassion for the pedophile than the victim. But don't misunderstand this. They have infinite compassion for everybody. The logic is because the victim is just finishing the result of their own past negative action. And the pedophile is just, who was the victim in the last life, is now just beginning countless lives of future suffering. So that's the logic of why to have even more compassion for the people who look like they're having a happy life. This is not just meant to be a joke or sarcastic. And if you don't do the Four Noble Truths in the middle scope, you will not understand this. So great compassion in the face of all the terrible suffering of all the rich people, happy people, smiling people, as well as the ones who are being harmed and, the really intense level of suffering. We see it, and this is the biggest question always come, I was mentioning. What happens is we do have compassion, but we haven't done much work in our own minds, and that's most of us. So we've still got attachment. We still have anger. We still get depression. So we see the suffering, and then we become paralyzed because we know we can't make it all go away. So then some people are overwhelmed. I mean, the number of people I've heard about, this is so understandable, who are working, incredible kind people working in hospitals, who have killed themselves out of despair and depression, seeing the constant suffering in the hospitals with COVID-19, That's unbearable. I mean, they've got such compassion, which is why they're doing that job. But if you're bombarded daily by suffering, and this is the point now, and it's so important to understand this. If we haven't worked on our own mind, if we haven't understood attachment, if we haven't understood attachment, and attachment is a junkie in us, and everyone's got it until you're highly realized. The attachment is a junkie in us that just only wants the nice things. So if you're a nurse in a hospital and you're really compassionate, but you also have attachment, if every time you work and everybody comes into the hospital, gets healed, and everybody walks out with a happy smile, you'll be really happy and you'll feel your job is worthwhile. But why do you think when all the people are dying, there's not enough medicine, you can't heal everybody, why do you think you want to kill yourself? Because your attachment isn't getting what it wants. This sounds so brutal, but this is the logic of the delusions of why we suffer. But if you're a bodhisattva, let's say, who's done the work, the more suffering you see, the more that energizes you to never give up, and you would never get overwhelmed. You will never get depressed. You will never despair. It gives you courage and strength. People's suffering is the grist for your mill. And what it is the great compassion. It is my job. I will do everything in my power. And then I also, with bodhicitta, will never give up becoming a Buddha because I want to benefit all. So you're driven by this intense enthusiasm, which we're going to discuss today, the 6 perfections. This is a powerful state of mind. But we would never think that if I'm this nurse in a hospital crying with daily, overwhelmed by the suffering, and it's true, it is overwhelming, I would never realize it's because I've got attachment. This sounds so peculiar to us. It sounds like a criticism. It's Buddha's explanation of why we suffer, because attachment's a junkie that only can bear the nice things. This is the trouble, you know. And we won't understand this if we haven't done junior school and high school. It's very clear. It's incremental work. This is incremental internal work. It's a bit like you go to university, you won't understand it until you've done junior school and high school. It's so obvious, but we don't realize that here. We just don't understand it. We haven't looked at the analysis carefully enough, you know. So the logic here, of course, is we've done all the inner work. We've done the junior school, high school, and then we get to the really radical one of exchanging self for others. And this is Pabonka Rinpoche, as he says in Lam Rim, when you get to this level of practice, it's changing self for others, making this paradigm shift of putting others first, and which is expressed in the 8 verses which we talked about. As Pabonka Rinpoche says, in order to engage at this level of practice, you need to be a suitable vessel. Or what's a suitable vessel? A person who's done junior school and high school. That's what he means. So we just talked all that. We discussed all that. So this culminates in bodhicitta. And I finished last week with a story about Harry, giving his life, prepared to give his life, but he was saved, falling off the mountain because of his bodhicitta and the power of the holy beings. So now the next level, we've got renunciation first 2 scopes. Now we've got bodhicitta, and now we go to the final stages of the bodhisattva path, which is going to be life after life after life, bopping along in different lifetimes, doing 2 things. One is the first 4 perfections, which is perfecting the compassion wing, all the work you do in relation to sentient beings, accumulating incredible virtue from practicing the first 4, generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance. And then in your meditation, you're perfecting the last 2, which is shamatha, single point of concentration. And then on the basis of that clarity and sharpness and brilliance of your mind, you then do the 6th one, the final one. And this is the culmination of the entire path, insight into the ultimate reality of how things exist. So let's do the first 4 perfections today, then we'll do the last perfection next week. That'll be our last teaching. Okay, so about before we move into this now, are there any questions about what I've said so far? If they're not, that's fine.
Doesn't look like there are questions in the chat.
Good, okay.
Venerable, I have a question.
Good, yes.
But it's not necessarily what we've talked about so far. It's just a general question.
Well, it has to come from what we've talked about so far, because what we've talked about so far, Cyril, is in the entire path.
No, I'm sorry. No, of course, I meant so far.
I know, I'm joking. Go on, say it to me what it is.
Is there a difference between mind and consciousness, or are they the same thing?
In Buddhist terms, they're used in different contexts, but they're effectively the same. They're used in different contexts. We always talk about I consciousness. We don't tend to say I mind. So that's always so. But consciousness and mind in general are used synonymously, but used in different contexts. That's the best way to put it. That's a really clear point, because I know in the modern world, we think we give consciousness sort of a more rarefied meaning. Do you understand?
Yes.
They're not. It's not. It has not. Everybody has a mind or has a consciousness. Everybody has. Everybody is a mind possessor. For example, they use the word mind. There's sem chen. Sem is mind. Sem chen is a term they use for sentient being, a mind possessor. We talk about I consciousness. We talk about mental consciousness. We don't say mental mind. So they're virtually synonymous, Cyril.
And it's also the same as the mental continuum.
Another term for it. Mental continuum is simple. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's just simply the term we use, obviously, to give this idea of this continuity of mind. This moment coming from the previous, and this moment going to the next, going to the next. Yes, exactly. So in other words, we have a mind, or we have a consciousness, and it has two ways of functioning, Cyril. We have sensory consciousness and we have mental consciousness. This is a crucial piece to understand. Sensory consciousness, and I'll spell it out. We talked about this in high school, middle scope, but I'll say it now because you've asked it. It's important. So in general, we have mind. In general, we have a mental continuum. In general, we have consciousness. And that's the non-physical part of us that's beginningless, that is not the handiwork of another being, it's not the handiwork of mummy or daddy, is not physical, it's not the handiwork, it's not the function of the brain, doesn't come from a superior being, and is the word used to refer to all our sensory experiences and our thoughts and feelings and emotions. Mind or conscious is the word that refers to all of that. It's beginningless, it's endless, it's got this potential to become a Buddha. These are the general statements. Okay, so now the specific thing is we have to distinguish between sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. And this is actually massive. We did talk about it, but I'll do it again briefly. So because we make the body the boss, as Lama Yeshe says, our body dominates our lives because we don't even think we're the body. And the five senses are dominate because they're the doorway between us and the entire universe, aren't they? So you can see we are our experiences of our body are huge for us, and we even use those to determine whether we're happy or suffering. So as soon as there's a slight headache, we're miserable. As soon as we feel pleasant, we're happy. We're sort of like totally addicted to the body and the experiences of our body, our five senses. So Buddha makes this distinction between sensory consciousness, and to spell it out, there's the part of my mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium of the eyeball, the nerves all working nicely. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, as they talk about it, the five sensory consciousnesses, that's how they talk. They function, they're the mind, so they cognize things. The job of the mind is to cognize. So eye consciousness, if I'm in love with Fred, I think my eyes see a divine, handsome Fred. We all think that. If I hear a sound that I find very ugly, I'll say my ear hears an ugly sound. This is not true. The senses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. And this is a technical point, that the eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color. So you have to ask the question then, what part of my mind is cognizing divine, handsome Fred? Ugly, horrible sound. That's your mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. That's where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions and unconscious and subconscious, that's where the work has to happen. We have to learn to, now the next point, Cyril, at that level, our mind at the level of the mental consciousness, which is where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions are, we've got two levels of functioning there. The grosser level, which is how we function in day-to-day life. All the endless thousands of thoughts and including emotions, that's the grosser level. That's conceptuality. But we've got a subtler level of mental consciousness, and that's what we access when we do single-pointed concentration, which we'll get to talk about. That's what we have to learn to do, to access this subtle level of our mind, which is super capable, super amazing, super brilliant, and which is these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago were the ones who cultivated this technique. And for the Buddha, and this is the fifth of the six perfections, we're going to get to it next week, we have to access this subtle level of mind, which is beyond conceptuality, beyond sensory, because that's the level of mind that can do the work of unpacking and unraveling all the rubbish and get to see reality. So we have mind in general, or consciousness. We've got sensory and we have mental. Sensory are limited, profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. Eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color. Ear consciousness can only cognize mere sound. Everything else, and I always use this analogy, and it's funny, but it's true. You know, the millisecond my eye sees that shape and color, instantaneously, because of my history with this Fred and all my attachment to him, then immediately, in a millisecond, quicker than Google, out comes the thought, wow, divine, handsome Fred, and I nearly faint with joy. All of that is in the mental consciousness, and it's a bunch of stories, conceptual stories that our mind has made up. This is vital to distinguish between the sensory and the mental. It's huge. Do you see?
Yeah.
And within the mental, you've got this grosser level, which is the level we function day to day at the conceptuality level, thoughts and feelings and emotions. And that in high school, what we have to unpack and unravel. Then we've got these subtle levels of mind, which in the long term, we have to access by using shamatha, so we can cut the root of all the rubbish and get insight into reality. Okay? Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is vital to understand. You know, these components, this point about what the mind is and what it's capable of. It's crucial to study it, and there's vast literature about this.
So would you say that conventional reality exists in the gross mind, and ultimate reality exists in the subtle mind?
The point you're suggesting is right, but the way of saying it is wrong. The way to say it would be that our gross level of mind, which is conceptuality, exists in the conventional, yet can only cognize things at the conventional level, but mostly even that's wrong. We'll get that next week. But when we get to the subtle level of mind, that level of mind is capable of cognizing ultimate reality. That's the way to say it.
Okay.
It's like the microscope of our mind. You understand?
Yeah.
Good, good, good. Thank you so much. It's very important.
Thank you.
Point. Thank you. Okay, people. So let's look now at the six perfections. We've accomplished bodhicitta. Let's imagine we've made this paradigm shift. Only some of the criteria of having accomplished bodhicitta. One is there's no longer the thought of I. I mean, this is almost insane, isn't it? You can't imagine this. Of course, you know you're I. You're not stupid. You don't think you're Fred and start kind of taking off Fred's clothes and putting on you. You'll be punched in the nose. You know who you are, but there's not that overwhelming, intense, this main player in ourselves right now, which is this poor little unhappy me. That's gone. We can't even imagine that. Maybe we might get flashes of it. You know, this is so outrageous. There's no longer the thought of I. There's no longer the thought of ever getting anything for yourself. You just don't notice. You wouldn't notice. You know, it doesn't occur to you. There's so many changes in the mind. It's quite incredible. And then only others, like his mother for these precious children. Yes, and then long-term for bodhicitta. So the two parts of bodhicitta, one is only the thought to help others. Every second, whoever's in front of you, it's your job. And second, long-term job is never give up working. This is the six perfections now. You never give up, life after life. Never give up, never give up. Focus completely on becoming a Buddha, because then you are now finally capable. Based on full wisdom and full compassion, now you know exactly how to help others, and you can do it. So now we go to the next level where we start to perfect this bodhicitta, perfect all this love and compassion that's driving this bodhicitta. This is the first four perfections. So the first one's called generosity. I mean, these first four, they seem sort of initially like an arbitrary list of good qualities. Generosity, good ethics, patience, and perseverance. It seems kind of odd. There's four. Why these four, you know? Let's look at them. Well, first, interestingly, they're taught in order of difficulty. So generous, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in one of his wonderful Lam Rim poetic, like hymns, they call them songs or hymns of experience. In one of those, called that, one of his Lam Rim's ones, it says that generosity is the wish-fulfilling jewel with which you can fulfill the hopes of all sentient beings. It's the basis of the activity of the Bodhisattva, in that it develops the selflessness and undaunted courage to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment. So with generosity, you just, because your job now is to help others. You have to keep remembering the basis of this is your job is to benefit others. You're a Bodhisattva now. So the first level of it is always seeing what people need. And we do that, we're generous. But of course, right now, because we don't have bodhicitta, we have generosity for our beloveds. You know, we can be very generous, but there's profound limits to our generosity. We can see this. So we're trying to get this generosity to be expanded to the point where when you can give your body, like Harry was prepared to do, you can say you've perfected generosity to that degree. So this sounds on the face of it quite simple, generosity, but it's a profound implication, because if we're ordinary people, the idea of giving is totally dependent on me. As long as I have enough, if there's anything left over, I might give it. It's very limited right now. So we're stretching our limits by practicing every second as much as we can, thinking there's a sentient being there. An ant, what do they need? There's a poor person, what do they need? There's your mummy, what does she need? It's automatically, it's a good example, I think. It's a great example. This type of level of wanting to give is like, and this next one, the morality, the same, and I'll describe, is like a mother for her child. You don't ask a baby what they need. God Almighty, what do you want, sweetheart? And they're 6 months old. How silly. This is profound. You know, and we tend to do that. We always say, oh, if you want anything, let me know. If you need something, you need food, little child, let me know. And you walk out the door. Sorry, dead baby 6 months later. You've got to anticipate. It's a really good example. You don't ask the baby what they want. You've got to know what a baby wants. That's a bodhisattva. You've got to know what sentient beings need. You don't ask them what they need. You anticipate and you give it. Giving is profound. So there's 3 levels of giving they talk about in the Lam Rim. The first one, the easiest, supposedly, is giving things, giving material things. And that's a pretty evident level of need on this planet, isn't it? You know. Then the second one is giving spiritual advice, but I think we like that one better. We love giving advice, even if you don't know what you're talking about. But to give $1, to give €1, not so sure, a bit nervous. You know, we get a bit nervous. I'm poor, I haven't got enough, I can't give. Look at us, you know. So this one of giving, even the first level, forget the advice one, okay? Look at the first one. It's a really good one to talk about. I love talking about this one. And my own life has been a very, you know, important kind of level of practice. I always talk about this when I had to run the prison project. So there I was, first it was in the mid-90s, and I was in California. I'd arrived, I'd been in America for about a year, and I was running in California, editing Mandala magazine, right? And then this prisoner wrote. That's how the prison project started. Arturo, this fellow, wrote. A letter came on my desk. And I heard he was in his cell 23 hours a day. I heard he'd been in prison since he's 11. He'd been in gang since he's 12. Gang since he's 11, prison since he's 12, and he's now 18. And, you know, and he got out a couple of years ago and he was 40. So he spent most of his life in prison. Anyway, I read this letter. This letter came to my desk, okay? And I could see he needed something. He wanted a book. He'd read a book of Lama Yeshe's. And I read the letter, and I could see he was in a cell 23 hours a day with no money, no friends. Clearly, I couldn't just send him a website, no computers. So then it was interesting. I looked at the letter. I left it there for a month, and I finally sent him a book. And then within a year, 40 people had been writing all this word of mouth on prisoners, you know, in these dire situations. So and I think, what can I give them? And I look in my pocket. There's nothing there. I've got a couple $100 a month in my food. I looked in the budget of Mandala. There's no money there. So this is the point about generosity, but also another one too, the enthusiasm one, which is the fourth of the 4 perfections, which I'll talk about. Such a good example for myself. I'm not trying to say I'm so good at it, but it was a really powerful practice. Then, you know, I'd see the need. The need was in that letter. It was so clear. And it was on my desk. That homeless person, they're in front of you, right? They're not someone else's homeless person. You're looking around, who's going to give them the money? You know, I can't afford it. I haven't got it. Or you try to pretend they're not there. But that homeless person's in front of you. That letter came on my desk. So I had to be very honest with myself. I could see the need was huge. So the first thing you often do, this is the enthusiasm one. This is the 4th one, actually, as well as the generosity one. But when there isn't much money, you tend to say, I can't do it. There's no money. How can I do this? But then when we realized, and this is how the prison project really did start, we realized I got a friend to start working with me, and it grew from there. We had to start saying, not, oh, we don't have the money, we can't do it, which is the usual way we go. or I don't have any money, so I can't do it. We had to shift it and say, by looking at the need was so evident, I will do it. Then you find the means. Other way around. That's the courageous attitude we have to cultivate with generosity. And all of these practices, you have to do that. You have to make this shift in the mind, because the default mode is, I don't have enough money, I can't do it, I've got no time, it's too difficult, I'm tired. I'm not being rude. We've got to stretch ourselves. You know, this is the whole point about Bodhisattva practice. We've got to be very authentic with ourselves, not lie to ourselves. That's how we started the Prison Project. And of course, it kept growing, more people. And by the time I was running it, and then I gave it 10 years ago, I stopped running it, more than 10, 12. And at that point, we had like 1,000 people, 1,000 letters a month from prisoners. So we had to have a system to handle this, you know, and we had a staff, 9 full-time staff, all being paid salaries. So because you've got to keep it going, you know. So generosity is the wish to give. And I'll never forget this. I'll tell you this. Years ago when I was running the Prison Project, one person was selling her house in Australia, and she wanted to give me some money from it to help the Prison Project. And she asked Lama Zopa, she had a crystal, and she asked Lama Zopa to write a mantra on the crystal to help sell the house, to put it in the house. And he said, do not think of receiving, think of giving. And that's become like the motto. I've got this bodhicitta trust, which is coming from that work, and that's the wish. Think, what can I give? That's the attitude we have to try and cultivate. Instead of, oh, I can't do it, I haven't got the money, or feeling threatened or overwhelmed, no, it's not too much, I can't do it. But, you know, think of giving, not receiving. In other words, like all these practices, we're trying to change our mind, not just some gooey feeling, we're trying to reprogram our mind. That was so powerful. And of course, by the time you get to bodhicitta, these bodhisattvas are like that. They're just perfecting it, you know. It's their job to give. Like a mother for the child. She doesn't look around who's going to give food to her baby, God Almighty. She knows it's her job. That's a really powerful analogy, you know. She doesn't sit there with a 6-month-old baby. What are you going to give me? No. You don't think like that. You've got to practice this. This is not easy, for God's sake. So this is the first level of giving. So now but we've got to look very honestly at our minds. Some of us think we're so generous, we give everything away, I'm so generous, but actually it's just sentimental, and it's just reputation. I'm such a generous person, but you've got no responsibility. And one of the really powerful things I think with money, we need to treat it with incredible respect. It happens to be the measure we use in our culture, that's all. There's no inherent existence. Money is just a fabricated dependent arising like everything else. But because we have so much fear and so much lack of generosity, we feel so mean and so miserly, I don't have enough. What am I going to do if I give? I'll run out of money. That means we don't even understand karma. I mean, even if we understand karma, junior school, we will know that even having access to 1 grain of rice in our life is a result of some level of generosity. The 2 main things we need to get a decent human body, one is morality, non-killing in particular. That gives you a decent human body. But generosity is what gives you conditions, decent conditions. If you didn't have generosity karma, you got a very handsome, beautiful body, but you'd be born in a desert with nothing. So generosity is fundamental for your own benefit. Do not doubt it. But it's a huge attitude to develop. It's like the first of these 4 perfections, and it opens your mind. It makes you courageous. What can I give? You don't run around looking like with a halo on, looking like a saint. Oh, what can I give you? No, you're being skillful. It's your mind that changes. But look how we are with money. We're so fearful of money. We're either really tight and miserly and save every cent and see it like self-existent and terrified of giving 1 extra penny. Or we think we're so generous and we throw it all away and we wonder why we end up with nothing. And then what happens is, I remember when I ran the Prison Project, we paid salaries according to people's needs, right? And I can see that nobody knows how to manage their money. I think we should do proper Buddhist courses on how to manage your money. I tell you, I'd love to do one of those courses. We're a disaster. So because we all have credit cards, we end up can't paying our credit cards. I mean, especially in this country where the student debt is so shocking. Billions of dollars of student debt. People are chained for the rest of their life with their student debt. It's so wicked. But many people just give up paying their credit cards, and they think, well, who cares? The credit card company doesn't care. And it's true. The credit card companies have budgeted in billions of dollars of losses. They're not worried. They're still making buckets. But that's not the point why you shouldn't pay your credit card, because every single thing you do sows seeds in your mind. So by not paying your credit cards, but by thinking you're being generous, one person, I remember she did her budget. I said to the staff, we come in, how much money you need for the month, we'll see if we can pay it, but give a budget for me, do a budget. So she had a budget. She budgeted in generosity to poor people every month. But then I asked them, well, you haven't got credit card payments here. Oh, no, I can't pay those. I owe $50,000. No, I don't pay those. That's insanity. That's so typical in America. Poor people, I mean, so much debt people have, 50, 60, 80, $100,000 of student debt. Most of their lives trying to pay it back. It's just too awful. So, of course, you tend to think, I don't care. So you think you're generous, but you don't pay your credit. So do negotiate with the credit cards. They don't care, but to be honest, because everything we do sows seeds in our mind. So the attitude has to be, I want to give. You don't have to sit there chained, do deals with them. They don't care, but you've got to have integrity about it. Treat every second of a cent of money with such respect, because it's just a measure we use for giving and receiving. It's a really important point. And then giving is the cause of receiving. This is the point, So sometimes some of us aren't mean necessarily. We don't have much money. So we think very small about it and get nervous if we waste, 50 euros or something, or 50 cents, forget the euros. That's a small mind as well. Because money is the result of our past generosity. It could be infinite amounts. We think it's good luck and bad luck. Oh, you won the lottery. What good luck? No, it's not good luck. It's the fruit of your generosity. While you lose money, is because it's the fruit of your stealing and your miserliness. So we've got to understand this, But the attitude here is to cultivate the brave attitude of when you see people's needs, what can I give? And of course, you can't give more than you've got. That's evident. You've got to be foolish. You've got to catch yourself all the time. So one practice I think is amazing, and it sounds so silly. This is my practice. I've copyrighted this practice. I always joke when I say this, but you listen to it. It's very brilliant. In old-fashioned days, you had a letterbox, right? And you still maybe sometimes now. I think more in Europe, in America, they still use checks. But like in the letterbox, you get one envelope which has got a bill in it for 20 euros, and another envelope, you've got a check for 20 euros. Now, I've never yet met a human being on this planet who, when they see a check, when they see a bill, doesn't go, oh no, got to give 20 euros. Never. But bodhisattvas would rather give than receive. That makes them nervous to receive. They quickly want to give it away because they're using up their merit. So don't think of receiving, think of giving. So the one thing we do, we can't stand paying our debts. We hate the credit card companies. We think they're evil, their rates, but no one forced you to do it. I mean, when I was doing the prison project, some people are shocked by this. I had like 20 credit cards. America will give a credit card to a dog, I promise you. Unbelievable. So I used so many credit cards, wheeling and dealing, getting money for this and that, but I never not paid 1 cent. I've got the top credit rating in this country because I paid all the debts properly. I love the credit cards. I love the banks, but you can be skillful if you're really on top of it. I mean, it sounds shocking. I'm just a Buddhist nun using credit cards just to help the prisoners, and it worked. I'm a bit risky sometimes. I wheeled and dealed, But get my point. So this practice, it's so simple. Practice when you see a bill, you've got to pay a bill no matter what, isn't it? You've got to pay it. So why be miserable? Why think, oh, I don't want to pay this bill. Oh, I can't afford it. What do you think you're doing to your mind? You are closing the door to receiving. So to have an attitude of being delighted to pay the bill. You have to walk around saying it in your own mind as soon as you see a bill. And then what's the logical reason for being happy to pay a bill? I'll tell you why. Because all the people who work hard in the credit card company, all doing their work at their computer, all these cogs in the big machine, all working so you can get the mortgage, so you can get the money in advance, so you can use your iPhone. All this, it's just the way the world works, So there's every logical reason to be delighted to pay your bill. Many poor people, homeless people have less debt. We've got more debt than most people. But that's why we're not homeless, because we're holding all these balls in the air. But be skillful and have an attitude to want to give. Treat your money with incredible respect. And the next one is budget giving into your budget. Put a line item called giving, like the Mormons, Because we tend to think, oh, I'll give if there's anything left over, then I'll give something. No, you're not being truthful. You have to want to give. And this is what's also interesting. You go to the coffee shop. We're happy to give them the 20 euros for 2 cups of coffee and a couple of buns. And what's also fascinating, because we get something for it, you see, we don't mind giving the 20 euros because we get a cup of coffee and a bun. But we also know if we did the analysis of that 20 euros, some percentage of that is pure profit for the company. That's, in other words, you're happy to give a donation to Starbucks, whoever you use in Zurich. You're happy to give a donation to the coffee shop But you're not happy to give the €5 or whatever the 10% is or whatever it is to the poor person outside because you get nothing from them. But you give 5, 6, 7 euros of that 20 to the coffee shop. Pure profit. You don't mind that because it's called commerce. But you won't give it to the homeless person because you get nothing in return. So it shows how mean we are. We need to do this analysis. Want to give. Just have the thought, wanting to give. You don't get nervous about it. You don't give more than you've got. You don't be foolish. You just, but having, everything starts in the mind. Your hand will not go in the pocket if your mind doesn't want to give that money. You'll have another reason. Oh, I can't afford it. Oh, I'll give later. Or someone else will give. Or they might buy drugs with my donation. That's not your business. It's a very powerful attitude, wanting to give, thinking I want to give, changing your mind. Then it makes it easier. And that's how I saw with our prison project. We became brave, you know. It gets, like anything, you practice it, it gets easier. That's the attitude of the Bodhisattva. And you grow it to the limit of degree to become like Harry, where you're happy to even give your life. That's the combination. That's the proof of the pudding. Power. This is giving material things. It's the first of the three. The second is giving advice. So watch that one carefully, please, because half the time we're not even qualified. And we love giving advice. We run around thinking we're, you know, always looking for people to be helped. Oh, that person out there, should I help them? Or should I give them this practice? Should I do that? Just mind your own business sometimes. Help yourself first, please. We often think we're being so kind, but we haven't done enough wisdom work yet. And the third is called giving protection, which sounds curious. Helping old people, so it's more like morality, which is the third one, but it's an attitude of giving protection. They call it that. Saving an ant from drowning in the sink, you know, that's called giving protection. Releasing people from prison, that's giving protection. That type of practice. Helping old people, helping your grandma, you know, things like that. People who have a lot of fear, helping them, give them courage. The second one then is morality. And this is the whole path is morality. The whole path is ethics from beginning to end, but there's different levels of ethics. Like I said, the first lot in the junior school and high school, it's the very first, and when you live in vows, it's the ethics of refraining from harming. Even you get to the Bodhisattva path where you get to achieve bodhicitta, all the Bodhisattva vows are still don't this, don't that, don't this, don't that. But the Bodhisattva vows are more expansive and they're based on motivation. Now at this level, there's the practice of proactively benefiting others. The logic is that we're now capable of benefiting. We've got to stop harming first. Now we've got some wisdom, we can even know how to benefit. So this level of morality, what does it mean by helping others? Well, it's obvious. Help the sick, help the poor, help the rich, help this, help everybody. It's an extension, if you like, of generosity, more than just giving. It's actually giving your time, giving a help that's needed. It really seems like generosity, but it's a more extensive level of it, a more expansive level of it. Helping those who need to be helped. It's your job, like the mother. It's your job, you know. I won't go into that too much. The next two are very fascinating. The third one is patience. So I think for us, this is a really dirty word. You know, we don't understand patience at all. And of course, since the beginning of even refraining from saying bad words and refraining from taking things that don't belong to you, or refraining especially from bad words or shouting back at somebody, we're already practicing patience. I mean, this is not as if we just begin to practice patience here. We've been practicing from day one. But here's a very powerful level of patience that really gives incredible strength, inner strength to the Bodhisattva to never give up benefiting sentient beings, you know. So patience is talked about, first of all, in terms of, you know, it's very blunt, the first level, the 3 levels. The first one is the patience in the face of abuse. This sounds so heavy for us, doesn't it? We can't handle this. It's just too shocking, you know. So remember, these are advanced practices. This is university level people. All we can do is do the best we can, knowing what we're capable of through the stages of practice. This is the point, you know. This doesn't exist in isolation. So what does that mean in daily life? It means every time someone says bad words to you, this particular one, the face of abuse, when you're criticized. This is common for everybody. Well, everybody's got people in their lives where bad things happen. It could be the driver in the car, it could be the person in the shop, person on the street, your sister, your beloved, your child, who shouts at you, who criticizes you, abuses you, intensively or mildly, either whatever one you can handle. The practice of patience, if you've got a whole toolkit of tools. You have a whole medicine cabinet of medicines that you apply. Junior school methods, high school methods, university methods, and now going to this level. It's all a question of which level, which medicine you want to use at different times. You choose to use which tool is appropriate for the time. The tool we're talking about here is this one of learning to eat the problem for breakfast. That's what patience is. Patience, you see, when we understand in high school, in the middle scope, what attachment and aversion are, attachment's the junkie that only wants the nice things. So then it's easy to, if there's anything happens, you're happy then. Your mind's spacious because you're getting what you want. The millisecond that person says the wrong word, then what arises is called aversion, which is the mild level of anger. Anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So patience is the exact opposite of anger. Anger arises, and it's like a panic attack. How dare you say that? How dare that happen? This is impossible. I cannot stand this. That's why we go crazy when we see suffering. Aversion arises. It's too hard for us to bear. It's too painful. So this level of abuse, this level of patience directly in relation to person saying something to you is you don't, it's the instinct of aversion. It's like instinct is to resist it, push it away. Attachment greets something and loves it. Aversion goes, oh, go away. So what patience is the exact opposite. The exact opposite. The exact opposite. You pull your sleeves up, you roll your sleeves up, and you bring it on, baby. You welcome it. So the same way that you're practicing thinking of giving and not receiving, here you're practicing, being happy, training your mind to greet the abuse. Now you've got to ask the question, why? What's the logic of this? If there's not logic to it, don't do it. The logic of this is on this path, you've got this enormous compassion for sentient beings. You want to do everything in your power to smash the obstacles to your becoming a Buddha. And what are the obstacles to your becoming a Buddha? Only your delusions. So you are trying to smash your delusions. So obviously every time someone abuses you, it's a wonderful opportunity to smash aversion, to practice patience. It's a powerful, courageous, brave, incredible response. But you've got to train the mind. We think of patience as basically like passive aggression. You're gritting your teeth, waiting for this horrible thing to go away. That is a passive aggression. That's not patience. That's suppressed anger. So this is a huge state of mind. It's so courageous. And the only way you're going to see that is when we see how we respond when attachment doesn't get what it wants. This is primordially deep inside us. So practice first patience in the face of being abused by people. But of course, if you see, this is the whole point. You've got to know where you're at. If you're still in the victim mode and you've hardly begun practice and you're living in this relationship with this nightmarish person who beats you up daily, you're so cowed and beaten and victimized. You've got no self-respect. You haven't begun to work on your mind. You have no idea about attachment. You've got no idea about anger. You've no idea about anything. Your job is not to accept that abuse. Your job is to stand up and have the courage to say, I'm out of here, baby. Goodbye. So you've got to know where you're at. These aren't self-existent practices. They're dependent arisings. You've got to know where you are at, what tools you use. Maybe, you're a person who's, a victim who's always quiet and thinks you're being so kind because your mummy's little helper, but you're suppressing everything. You're too scared to say the wrong word in case someone doesn't like you. So maybe your practice is just stand up and say, excuse me, mate, back off, shut your mouth. That's probably the best practice you can do. You've got to know where you're at. But this level of practice is what we're discussing here. So try it once a month, nothing wrong, and keep growing. The reason you want to practice patience is because you want to smash attachment and smash anger. That's it. So simple. I always use the example of all the sportsmen or people who work day and night. I was thinking of Lance Armstrong was such a fanatic. I remember reading a long interview about him. Such a fanatic, an absolute fanatic. He's a good example of a bodhisattva in this sense. He wasn't a bodhisattva, probably. He doesn't mind. Wasn't the point. But he would, in other words, a person like that would rather have the high mountains than the going down the mountain. He wants the challenges. A person who's at the gym trying to get super fit and become the best, most healthy person on the planet will love the hard work. They will greet the pain. That's the bodhisattva, but it's emotionally, not physically. So we understand this approach, having this brave attitude. Of course, that's just samsara, but it's a good analogy. This is huge. So then the next level of patience is the patience of when bad things happen, like you get sick, obstacles in your life, no money, all the dramas that happen that are so painful for us. Patience in the face of those. Patience, you see, we tend to think of it as passive aggression, and we tend to think of it as no action. No, it's a very proactive state of mind. It doesn't mean you continue. That's where perseverance comes in. It's like an extension of patience, the fourth one, where you never give up. They're like extend, they go to each other. Generosity and morality sound very similar. And then these two, patience and perseverance, seem to lead to each other. One leads to the next. It's very interesting. That's my view of it. The third kind of patience is patience in relation to all the obstacles to your practice in particular, And this leads us to the fourth one, which is called joyful effort, or enthusiasm, or perseverance, or effort. All these different words. They sound kind of interesting, but the only way to really understand them clearly is by understanding the opposite. And that, shockingly enough, surprisingly enough, oddly enough, is the word laziness. This is very fascinating, I tell you. But before we go further, noon, what is it? We've got 30 minutes left because I've got to leave 15 minutes earlier. So we've got 30 minutes. Okay, so sweethearts, put some questions first on the first ones I've said so far, if there are any questions.
I have a question. Hello, Venerable.
Hello there.
What you said about the spiritual advice, and that we also often talk more than we actually know, just to fill the gap. I can really resonate with that, but I was just asking myself, sometimes I also feel like I can say something that makes kind of sense, even though I'm really restricted in my knowledge. So I was wondering, when is a good time to say something, and when should I refrain from saying anything?
No, it's a good point. It's a good point, Bogdan. Exactly. It's a very good point. If you just use an ordinary example of an ordinary person, there's you and there's a 5-year-old, and they say to you, Bogdan, what is 1 + 1? Now, honey, you're asking the question, when is it good to answer and when not? If you don't know the answer, you say, sorry, I can't help you. If you know the answer, you give it. So as you keep progressing in your knowledge, and if you've got some insight into someone's mind, and they're there, and they're struggling with their depression or something, and you have to first know they want the advice. Often we just shove it down people's throats. So that's a really evident one. So if you start forcing mathematics down that little kid's throat and they haven't asked you, they're going to resist you. So the really time to answer is when a person asks you. One of the key things in Buddhism, the fundamental, and it's so logical, you don't tell people what to do. We love to do this. We love, because our own anxiety, our own attachment, especially if we're a parent or a friend, as soon as the person expresses a problem, we just want to pour out all this advice. Do this, why don't you do that? Because we feel a neurotic responsibility. It's my job to make them better. This is so inappropriate, so rude, So you've got to have the wisdom to know, based on what the person, simple enough for a 5-year-old asking you a question, straightforward. They're asking you. They're not sitting there playing their trains and you come along and shove math down their throat. That's rude. So if a person doesn't ask you advice, you might see they need advice, but that doesn't mean you give advice. Let's say you really know nutrition and you can see that I'm 20 kilos overweight and eating garbage food, and I haven't asked you any advice, but you start lecturing me about not eating sugar. I'll tell you, back off and mind your own business. So first of all, you've got to have you genuinely come from the wish to want to be a benefit. First, that's compassion. Second, you've got to know that I'm ready to hear the advice. That even I've asked you, but then you've got to have and then you have to have the knowledge to answer. So there's several things there. If all those aren't together, shut your mouth is really the way to put it. You get my point?
Definitely. And interestingly, I'm currently studying psychology, and we had we have practicals where we practice counseling, and there was one situation where one person had to act and be a person that's really rude and angry and doesn't want to hear anything of what the psychologist says. So
Exactly.
they were really being what you just described. They were yeah, not receptive for anything. So what then? Because sometimes also people are referred to psychologists when they have done any crimes or
I
something.
understand that. Yes, exactly.
So what then?
That's
What
a
to
different
do then?
scenario. That's a very interesting point, Bogdan. All the years I visited prisoners and went into prisons, it was always totally that they invited you. That was fundamental. So one time, once ever, in all the years I was running it, one friend of mine, a psychologist in a prison in Melbourne, was dealing with the sex offenders unit. And she invited me to give a talk. And as soon as I walked in the room with the 50 prisoners there, I knew they'd been told to come. I did not talk one single word. They were resentful because they're treated like children in prison. You know, you're forced to do things. They had no interest. I did not talk about it. I talked about the weather. I cracked jokes about football, and I left early because they hadn't chosen to come. That's the fundamental point. So if a prisoner's forced to come to see you, you know, you've got to learn to become their friend, Bogdan. You become skillful. You show them love and kindness and listen to them and crack jokes. Don't stand like a policeman and give them lectures. There's many ways of helping people. Many people aren't capable of listening. Many people are completely mentally ill and can't hear anything. Many people actively don't want to listen. You've got to have the wisdom to know that just giving advice is not necessarily the way to help people. You just love them, be kind, give them a hug, talk about them. I mean, win them over. Then one day they might be open to some advice you've got. So it needs incredible wisdom. But if we've got so much attachment to our own mind, our own self as being a psychologist, being a helper, we're just so arrogant, you know. These days, at least, it's a little bit better, I think. But 50 years ago, when you had to become a psychiatrist and you were these smart-ass elitist people who thought they were the most pure, wise people who sort of look down upon all the mentally ill and give lectures, pills, excuse me. At least people now who do therapy and psychology do a bit themselves as well. And that's the fundamental point in Buddhism. You can't help a fly if you can't help yourself, which is why the wisdom wing is where you do the hard work for yourself. Then you can help others. Are we communicating?
Definitely, yes.
Good.
Thank you very much.
So often parents, look at parents. Parents, just because they've got so much attachment to their children, they just think they've got to give advice the whole time. That's why kids go crazy. Shut up, mum, leave me alone. You know, we're shoving down advice down their throats all day, every day. But that's our own attachment. So sometimes the best thing is just let the child talk and say, I don't know the answer, darling. You've got wisdom. You'll work it out. This is incredibly powerful advice, you know. But we just leap in. And why we leap in is because of our own attachment, our own neediness to make everything lovely. It's arrogance. It's incredible. So, I mean, to be anybody, even just a tiny piece of advice, not to mention in the formal relationship of a psychologist or even me giving advice to people who come along, you know, we've got to have the wisdom not related to attachment that understands the problem and to understand where the person's coming from and what it is we can say. Sometimes some lamas, I mean, His Holiness is so wonderful. Dalai Lama one time, he's so blunt and funny. He acts very much like a Western person. He's so wonderful. You know, I remember one fellow asking this long question. Two different scenarios, remember, long, complicated question. And His Holiness listened carefully. And then he wanted, and the fellow said, what should I do? And His Holiness said, I don't know. That's it. I mean, just to say that. The other time was so funny. Another fellow was upset about his sister being mean to him, and he said, and His Holiness said, well, I'll tell her to go to hell. That was his advice. You've got to be really skillful, you know. We're so serious. Giving people advice all the time. We never stop it. We just never stop it, you know. Even your friends just chatting about their problems and we dump advice on them. We're so rude, you know, because it's our neuroses, our own kind of arrogance and our own attachment to make everything nice. You understand, Bob?
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Thanks.
Good. And we call it helping. Oh, it's so kind. Help that person with their practice. But mind your own business and do your own practice, you know. And sometimes the best help is just to be loving and kind and give them a hug. I swear to you. You know.
Yep.
Very good point. Thank you, Bogdan. What else, people?
Yes, Alona has a question. Please unmute yourself.
Good.
Hello, Venerable. Thank
Hello,
you for your teaching.
Good, pleasure.
I was wondering, I've heard you saying a few times when someone in Theravada's path and they
Sorry,
achieve
what? The ones who's in
Theravada path, they're
Oh,
achieving
yeah.
their own liberation and they are here.
That's the
right?
first stage of the practice. That's right.
I was thinking like a liberated mind, in my understanding, my limited understanding, is full of compassion, love.
Yes,
You know,
of course.
how can they just
No
check
question.
out? No?
What does? No,
How
but that's
can they
very-
just...
No, that's it's a bit sort of rude to ask that question like that. I mean, you're asking it. It's a good point.
Sorry.
Don't be rude. No, darling, please forgive me. The person who has achieved nirvana, who has realized emptiness and perfected those and has achieved liberation, you can't conceive of the high level of unbelievable virtue, unbelievable bliss, unbelievable joy, unbelievable compassion. But the interesting point is the Buddhist views over the centuries have developed, and there are debates they all have with them. So the key factor of the Theravadan path, the Theravada teachings in Burma and Thailand and wherever it's taught, is that when you've achieved nirvana and then you die, there is nothing left. You don't have a choice. You're gone. The mind is finished. It's a very different teaching. Can you hear the words there, Alona? Did you hear what I said?
Yeah, I hear you.
There's no choice. When you've achieved the goal, you've cut all the root of delusions. You don't have a choice. When you die, you are finished. But His Holiness joked one time and said, we Mahayanas have a problem with that. Because the Mahayana view says, no, mind never ends. So that's the reason behind that. You're not just being, you're not thinking you're being selfish because you've got no choice. So the only way you can continue to get reborn is if you don't achieve nirvana in your mind. Because then if you've achieved it, you've cut everything. And as far as they're concerned, you've even cut the mind. There's nothing left. The Mahayana view disagrees with that. But the other thing is this. The Mahayana view of it is this. You will continue. Your mind will continue, but you won't get reborn in samsara, but your mind will go to a subtle state of bliss. And you'll be there for eons. And then Buddha will come and tap you on the shoulder and says, okay, honey, now you've got to get out of this bliss now, and then get back on the Mahayana path and you'll be a benefit to others. So it's all to do with what's in the mind. It's all to do with what the motivation is. So if you have that view that you are disappearing and your goal is to get out of samsara, which is a very worthy goal, and you will, over life after life after life, you will develop incredible love, compassion. You'll be amazing. You will be extraordinary because that's all that's left in the mind. You've cut all the delusions. But the point is, when you're on that goal with your goal to be nirvana, I'm going to get out of samsara, and that's your goal, as you're progressing, you're going to get more love, more wisdom, more compassion, there's no question, and more joy. But when you die because of your programming of your mind, your bliss and your motivation override your compassion, and you won't come back. But then the Buddha has to come along and remind you to do that. But the Mahayana one is, because the mind will continue, and you have the capability of becoming a Buddha. I think in the Theravadins, I'm not so clear, really, I'm not sure. But I think they of course, they posit the possibility of Buddhahood, but it's only a few people who can achieve that. So there are some people on the Bodhisattva path, they say, and that's why you read in Theravadan literature that you hold back from becoming a Buddha. You hold back from becoming a Buddha. You hold back from achieving nirvana. But the logic being that if you've achieved Buddhahood and achieved your nirvana, then when you die, you're gone. There's nothing left. That's the basis, and that's the Mahayanas don't think that. There's a bunch of different things there. But if you're on the Mahayana path and your goal is Buddhahood, you even get to the point where you don't need to come back. But when you die in that life, your bliss, your compassion, and your great compassion, it's my job, will override your bliss, and you will keep being reborn. So it's a question of what your motivation is and how you program your mind life after life. Do you understand, Alona?
Yes.
Good. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Good. Who else, people? Questions? Huh?
Jill has a question.
Good. Talk to
Please
me, Joe.
unmute yourself.
Come on, sweetheart.
Venerable, hello.
Hello, Jill. Talk to me, darling.
Good
Where
to see
are you? What's that view in the background? Was that a picture?
Oh, that's fake. That's Hollywood Hills somewhere. I don't know. Looks nice.
Oh, good. Okay. Talk to me, Jill.
I like to move around in my virtual world that I live in from my sofa.
I love it. There you go.
Yeah, question. Could you perhaps elaborate on what you would actually be thinking and doing whilst practicing patience in the face of abuse?
Yes.
So, yes, please.
Yeah, but the point is, if you haven't, this is my point all the time, if we haven't done the earlier work of abiding by the laws of karma, understanding that everything that happens to us is because we created it, understanding your own mind very deeply, subduing attachment, if you haven't done all that work, at this level, you won't be able to practice. It'll be too painful. You won't be able to do it. You'll have no basis. Are you hearing that point first?
Yes, I know right now I could not do it. I would swing between aversion, anger, suppression.
Of course, that's exactly how we are now. That's how we are. But this is what practice means. Practice means we have to try, isn't it? That's what the point. And
What
we can
would
do
I
it.
be trying to do? That's my question. What would I be thinking?
Okay, this is it. This is it. So the views, the philosophical views that are in the mind of a person who is attempting to practice this level of patience, the first one is fundamental, that, and we've been training our mind in that already if we're on the path, is that every second of what I experience out there at the hands of others is the direct result of my actions similar to that. So if we think of that in terms of the good things, the Bodhisattva, when the good thing happens, they are so delighted. If you're kind, say I'm kind to you, and Jill is a Bodhisattva, you'd be blissing out because you realize this, my being kind to you is the direct result of your own past virtue. And so, of course, you don't want to waste that, so you be kind right back. Then you'll equally know that when I'm mean to you, here comes my shitty stuff. So you just, it's like an echo. You've just got the result of your negative action. And so then there's no reason to have anger. Even before this, the logic of anger, this is what, okay, I can talk about this in a long way. The logic of anger, analyze what anger's saying. Analyze the philosophy. Anger is a philosophy. Attachment is a philosophy. It's a viewpoint. It's an assumption. Even the view of karma already starts to counteract this assumption that I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. I only deserve the good things and I don't deserve the bad. That's the basic series of assumptions deep in the minds of all beings, Jill. So by understanding karma, we start to break that down. By getting to the next level, where we start to look at attachment and aversion, we start to break that down even further. And by the time we get to the Bodhisattva path, it is easy for us to be happy when the bad thing happens. Because now it's smashing your anger and you want to do as much as you can. You're going to welcome the problem. As Lama Zopa says, we have to learn to like problems like we like ice cream. So the unpacking, which is, of course, it's hard. This is what practice is. Being a Buddhist doesn't mean just watching our breath. Being a Buddhist means internalizing the philosophical view of karma, which for the Buddha is the view that runs the universe. He didn't make it up. This is literally the view that runs the universe, the law that runs the universe, that whatever we experience is the fruit of our past actions. So as Lama Zopa says, everything is our karmic appearance. So we practice delighting when the good things happen because we must have created the cause. And then we practice greeting the bad things because we also created those. So, you use the analogy of seeds and fruits, which is a good one for karma. We know very well, Jill, that if you've got a magnificent garden, you never forget that what's in that garden is what you put there. But with the view of karma, that's what's being said. But we come into this life with the view that someone else put me here, and then bad people put the weeds in, and good people put the fruit, and we deserve the fruit and don't deserve the bad, don't deserve the weeds. That's our view now. That's automatic. That's what anger is. That's what victim is. So there's a lot of unpacking we have to do. And then we slowly practice. In the beginning, of course, it's practice. It's not easy. This is my karmic appearance. We don't believe it. We don't want to believe it. So it's slowly, we practice thinking that way and then greeting the problem. And why should we greet it? Because we want to smash anger. I mean, it smashes all the previous part of the path is the thinking that we do to then equip us to handle these situations. Are we communicating?
Yes,
Sure.
I don't think I'm there yet. I would love to. I'm trying to think through the scenario and what I would be thinking and doing rather than going, I don't want to hear this.
That's right.
What would I be?
But that's the way we are programmed now. That's the typical samsaric person, Buddha says, that has the view that we didn't ask to get born, that when there's innocent victim, that isn't our fault. Look into those views. We have those instinctively, don't we? That's the feeling that arises. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it, we'll say. Isn't it? That's the view.
And it's sort of like, maybe I do deserve it, or
that's when we get guilt. I must be a bad person. Yeah, that's the other flip side, which is also revolting.
Yeah.
also extreme and unhealthy, you know. So there's masses of unpacking to do. And that's why this is the most advanced level of it, but it implies having done the earlier work. And most of us still are at that level. We're still trying to do the earlier work of accepting, understanding karma, accepting responsibility, knowing we created ourselves, knowing we're not an innocent victim. This is slow daily work, one step at a time. And we, like anything, we get better at it, you know. Do you understand, Jill? And that's why, if I said, like I say before, let's say you're in the situation, let's say there's a person who's still in the victim mentality, who's never thought of working on their mind, never heard of karma, never thought of seeing bad things as good, then that job of that person is not to sit there like a little martyr. Their job is to stand up and tell the guy to go away, and I'm going to leave here, get out of here. So we've got to know where we're at, what we're capable of. Like any level of knowledge, you've got to know what you can handle. We've got to know ourselves well, you know, maybe we're not capable of doing that, so we have to do earlier work first. You understand? But what's interesting, sometimes, Jill, and this is a really powerful point, like I always think of my friends in prison, they don't have a choice. When your back's against the wall and you don't have a choice and you literally cannot change what's in front of you, this is when we are forced to try to practice, because that's our saving grace, instead of going mad. And that's what my friends in prison do. It's very admirable. Do you see my point? It's huge. In fact, when I read some of the experiences of my friends, it's incredibly powerful, you know, because sometimes you've got to kind of speed up the practice because you don't have a choice. You don't have the luxury of having lower level practice because you're forced to the highest one. Do you understand? And that can be very powerful. It can make or break us, you know. Some people can go mad because it's too much to bear. Do you understand? Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much, darling. Okay.
Kimberly and Mandy, do you have questions?
Who?
Okay, maybe it was a misunderstanding.
Okay.
Kimberly.
So let's talk. Okay. Nobody? Somebody?
Oh,
Okay, good. So let's talk about now this fourth of the first four. It's called enthusiasm or joyful effort. And the opposite is laziness. So let's analyze again what laziness means. It's very fascinating, actually. So first of all the Lamas would say, and this is very logical in our own lives, if you just talk about samsara, that without making effort, think about this, a simple word, without making effort in anything, you won't achieve it. It's very sort of obvious. But analyze this. What does making effort imply? It's obvious. You have to make effort in something that you're not good at. It's obvious, you know. And we all know that, even just talking samsaric world, to achieve anything at all, anything, you have to, you know, most often to achieve something. No, to achieve something you can't do now implies you've got to go beyond your comfort zone to make effort in order to accomplish it. Even learning to walk, learn to ride a bike, learn to type, anything you have to do that you haven't done before, to be able to accomplish it, it absolutely does demand you've got to push past your comfort zone and develop this new groove in your mind. It's really, really obvious. That's the general meaning of effort. So if you want, and that's why all the Lamas say, you will not make effort in anything if you don't know the benefits of it. So here, of course, we're talking the spiritual path. But I mean, they say making effort in samsaric things is just another form of laziness. But if we use even the analogy of ordinary life, we'll get the point. So let's just use the gym as an example. But keep remembering, we're talking spiritual practice here, not the gym. That's just samsara. But it's a good example. You decide you're going to go to the gym. Why? You look in the mirror, you're 10 kilos overweight, and you want to lose some weight and get fit. And that's an ordinary thing to think, you know. So, but just necessarily, the first form of laziness, the 3 levels, is, oh God, I can't be bothered. Now, analyze what can't be bothered means. Can't be bothered means you don't want to stretch your limits. You don't want to go past your comfort zone. And why is that? Because that's attachment. Attachment is this junkie in us. And there's multitude of ways of talking about attachment, but this is the most primordial way here. It's this part of us, the attachment only wants comfort. It only wants to be in our comfort zone, physical, mental, emotional, you name it. And anything that's beyond our comfort zone, that is the grossest level of laziness. Oh, I can't be bothered. Too much effort. So that's why we sink into our comfort zone. And all we do, we spend most of our lives just trying to fulfill our own attachments needs, being comfortable, getting them out of sleep, going out of this, getting them out of food, and be comfortable. The second it's uncomfortable, we quickly try to fix it. This is the grossest level of laziness. Can't be bothered. And the thing you can't be bothered doing is the thing that takes effort. And the thing that takes effort is what attachment doesn't want. It's very simple. Attachment is the primordial problem because it's junky to be comfortable. That's the grossest one. Can't be bothered. That's evident. It's easy to see it. We can't lie to ourselves. Can't be bothered. Now, the next one's really, it's sort of like part of the first way they teach it, but to me, it's like another level. This is really tricky one. This is wicked, this one. You see the thing you want to, you know, the job you got to do. Let's use the gym as an example. The first one is you can't be bothered. You wake up, you decide, you know, you come home from work, you're tired, you've had your dinner, and it's a bit chilly out there. And you look at and you go, oh God, I can't be bothered. So you can't be bothered. You just go and watch telly. Can't be bothered. The next one is more tricky. It's wicked. It's wicked. You go, you see the job you got to do. I'm talking ordinary samsara again, just the gym. And then you quickly go, oh no, I'm too busy. I'll do it later. Procrastination. This is the wickedest one. This is the wickedest one. This is our worst crime against ourselves. We make it sound like a virtue. Just saying to you, I can't be bothered. We should be honest. But this one is, I can't be bothered. Then, oh, I'll do it later. And you feel like a saint. But you know, later never comes. You look at, and I'm not talking spiritual practice here, but this is what we're really supposed to be talking about. But when we ordinary life, we understand this. And when then we carry this burden like a turtle carrying their house. All the undone jobs, all the things you've put off doing, can't be bothered, do it later. Later never comes, and all that comes is guilt and a burden. We all know this one. And what is the thing you're too busy to do? The thing that takes too much effort. And what is the thing that takes too much effort? The thing that attachment doesn't want. So to be honest with ourselves, we've got to really recognize what it means is we haven't prioritized it. You know, you'll do what you prioritize. And the things sometimes we know, you know, because we get salary at work, we know we just can't afford to sleep in one day because we'll get the sack, and we know we can't afford not to have the money. So we'll make the effort. And again, keep remembering we're talking samsara here. The definition of effort here is only in terms of spiritual practice, but using these ordinary experiences to help us understand. So some things we will make the effort because we know we'll get sacked and we can't afford that. There's no way you're going to be late for you know, or there's no. So in other words, this is the point. The Lamas say you'll only make an effort when you know the benefits. So we're talking ordinary samsara here. We know the benefits of getting a salary. If you're going to meet your friend, you know, a new date, there's no way in the universe you're going to be late because you know the benefits of getting a new boyfriend. You'll do anything to get over the obstacles because you're so obsessed with getting the goal to be there on time to impress him. So when you know the benefits of something, and of course we're talking spiritual practice here, and that's 1,000,000 times harder than samsaric benefits. That's the only time you're going to make effort. And as all the Lamas say, if you don't make effort, and it's logical. If you don't make effort to get thin at the gym, you won't get thin. It's really clear. You don't get thin by sitting on your couch. We try methods, but it doesn't work. You've got to tone your muscles. You've got to make effort. And this is the interesting point. Once we start getting into the habit of going to the gym, we've got to, groan, oh no, I'd rather stay at home. But you remember the benefits of a nice thin body or whatever. And again, this is only samsaric. It's not really effort at all. Then you will make the effort, you'll hop in the car, you'll go to the gym, and you'll be so happy, won't you? You'll come home, you'll feel so much better. Wow, I did it, you know. So we're talking spiritual practice here, which of course is much, much harder. But it's logical that if you don't make effort, you can't achieve anything. You can't achieve anything until you make effort. It's so clear. So the first one's can't be bothered. Second is I'm too busy, which is a lie. And we know later never comes. And we all do this. The third one seems odd initially, but it's very logical. This is the most pervasive, the most primordial, and the biggest obstacle to achieving our goals, our spiritual goals, is the view, oh no, I can't do that. That's impossible. That's not possible. So use the gym. Let's say you're 20 kilos overweight, you've got no muscle tone, you've never been on a gym, and never been in a gym in your life, you've never done any jogging, you've never used a machine, and it looks impossible to you. Impossible. You see yourself in the mirror, you see the end result of your girlfriend, you go, no, I can't see the way between me and that. Impossible. I can't do that. And you just sink into despair. That's the worst one of all. So we've got to understand the logic that we can do it, but it's not overnight. We know that. You don't turn from 20 kilos overweight to suddenly perfect in one day. You've got to see the incremental process, cause and effect between it, and you go one step at a time. We do that with spiritual teachings. We easily put, we say, oh, that's just the Dalai Lama. Oh, and then we say, oh, I can't do that. Especially if Lama Tsongkhapa shows the aspect. I mean, all the Buddhas are the same, but they show different aspects to us in the world. And it seems to me, my observation is His Holiness shows a very ordinary aspect of being an ordinary person. He never shows any powers. He talks very ordinarily. But I mean, Lama Tsongkhapa, I'm not saying he shows powers, but he's renowned for not sleeping, for example. He never lies down. He's renowned for this. So then I think of that and I go, that's impossible. How could I possibly do that? It's true, I can't. It's true, I can't do that. It's like you first go to tennis class and you see Federer on the next court. Of course you're going to say, oh my God, that's not possible. Of course I can't do that. But the wise person will see if he can do it, there must be a method. So that means I can do it. And that's the real effort. Then you'll do all the other efforts. But it takes incredible will, incredible courage. But the point is, you don't suffer until you become like Federer. Once you make effort, you enjoy the process and you get courage each step of the way. It's cause and effect. It's emptiness. It's dependent arising, And that's why it's so important to read the text, to read the experiences of the yogis, to read their experiences. Because if they can do it, so can I. I know that's why for me it's so moving to hear the stories of the yogis, the stories of, I know when I was a Catholic, I love reading all about the saints, because it makes you think I can do it too. My great hero when I was 13 was Saint Therese of Lisieux, this little nun who suffered for God. She was such an example for me. I tried every way I could. It's so odd, when I was a little girl, 12, 13, I was always naughty, and then I was always holy too, but they didn't seem to come. But I don't know how they fit together, but they did. I was always thinking about God and Our Lady and the saints, aspiring to be like them, but I was also the naughtiest girl in the class and at home. It's very odd how these two parts of me fit in. So I was so naughty at one point, when I was 12, I think. My mother discovered me walking down our main street trying to seduce the greengrocer's son. I was 12 years old, I think, with high heels, lipstick, earrings, the whole works. She freaked out completely. And she made me go to boarding school, because I studied at a convent and they had boarding as well. So she sent me off to live there. So this is the irony. I then became even more holy. I went to mass 7 mornings a week. I wanted to be a nun. I remember after that on my knees begging my mother, begging my mother, can I be a nun like Saint Therese of Lisieux? And I cried when she said no, of course I did. So having examples is very powerful, is what I'm saying. Then I became a Buddhist nun 20 years later, and then she cried. Of course she did, Then she said to me, well, I wish I'd let you be a nun when you wanted to be. I said, oh, Mummy, it's all the same. Well, if it's all the same, why did you change? Very logical. Anyway, it's good to see examples. And that's why if we're going to it uses His Holiness, not just to put him on a pedestal. Oh, that's just His Holiness. That's insulting. Or Lama Zopa, oh, that's just Lama Zopa. These people, if they are who they are, they don't need human bodies. The only reason they take a human body, this is the Bodhisattva path. The only reason they have a human body is to show us how to be. They can get enlightened much more quicker than Buddha in the Pure Lands, I promise. So we've got to use them as examples. You don't just look at Federer and just go, oh, I can't do that. Yes, you can. If he can do it, there are methods. It means you can do it. That's the real one. And then you get encouragement when you achieve each baby step of the way. Every time you go to the gym, you feel a bit better about yourself. So we're going to be humble with ourselves. This is dependent arising, humble, quietly, one step at a time. What do they always say? Rome wasn't built in a day. It's so profound, One step at a time. But we love to what do we say in the West? Sabotage ourselves. I'm disastrous. I'm no good. I can't do it. Not true. Be more humble. You can. But one tiny step at a time, not overnight. That's foolishness. You'll break your back if you try to get thin overnight. I'm sorry. So it's humble. I can do it. The methods are there and they're showing me what I can become. That's the job of our mentor. That's the job of our guru, to show us what we can become. That's what's inspiring, So this enthusiasm is a huge one, but it's not all automatic. I mean, when we say enthusiasm, we just think of a person hyperventilating. It's ridiculous. It's emotional. It's a solid, grounded, clear attitude that catches your mind, you know, and goes against the first kind of laziness, goes against the second one, and goes against the third one. And then slowly, incrementally, you look back and you realize you've moved forward quite a few steps and you get courage, you know. So important, this one. Enthusiasm. And we all know we love enthusiastic people. We love people, you know, who have got, like, you know, like Lama Zopa, like His Holiness, joyful. They're joyful. They've literally got joyful effort. But then eventually it's not even effort anymore because it's effortless, but it's joy. But we get such courage from that. Instead of this brutal self-loathing we have. I can't do it. I'm hopeless. I'm a disaster. Not true. It's just not true, you know. It's just not true. We can. There's a lovely saying in English. And I love this. I love this saying. We pave the way. I think it's used in different ways, but you pave the way. You grow this pavement now, and then that moves you to the next one. And then you look back and you've got all these pavements behind you, you know, all these paving stones that you've created. And that's what gives you courage, because you feel that you're moving forward. One step at a time, stable. Time to go. I've got to go. Oh my God, I've got to go. Where's this person? She's supposed to pick me up. 10 to 2, my goodness. Goodbye, people. Thank you so much. Much love, Jangchub, Semchog, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchig, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du, Pava Shog. So next week we're going to do concentration and emptiness. Okay, we're going to squeeze our brains next week. We're squeezing our hearts today. We'll squeeze our brains next week, okay? Much love, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Venerable.
Thank you, precious ones. You can do a little dedication prayer once I've gone, Talia, okay?
Yeah.
Goodbye, darlings. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Talia. Thank you,
Have a
Bob.
good day, Venerable.
Thank you, Cyril. Goodbye.